Welcome to resilient.com. Today in our studio, we have Jack Harrer, an American soldier. Welcome, Jack. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here, man.
He's just getting ready to go back to the Ukraine. He's been working with the Ukrainian armed forces over there since earlier this year, since the war started. And certainly an unusual guest for us to have on Resilient, and a great topic, and one that's really relevant right now with everything that's going on over there in the war. So, Jack, here you are. You've come back and you're ready to go back to the front, or at least to the Ukraine, to assist there. Why did you decide to risk it all to go to another country to fight the Russians?
Yeah. So when this kicked off in February this year, it was unbelievable. I've spent some time. I was U.S. Army for a while, and I've spent quite a bit of time considering that we do live in a world of peaceful engagement between countries. I mean, there's exceptions, of course. Low intensity conflict. We've been fighting that for decades in the United States. But the fact that a conventional war kicked off in Ukraine, and there was a use of artillery meat grinder tactics, the use of bombing civilian targets, kind of what we're used to with Russia and places like Grozny and Syria going on in this country on a massive scale. It was unacceptable to me. So I had something to provide to the fight for the Ukrainians, and I decided to go.
Awesome. And let's talk a little bit about your background. Obviously, you can't just show up in a war zone. What have you done? What's your background? And, what do you bring to the table over there?
So definitely over a decade of experience. The largest portion of that would have been the U.S. Army. I was a master gunner, Bradley master gunner over there, advanced marksmanship instructor. Just and well prepared, I would say, for the conventional fight against Russia. That's my military background. It's kind of a normal soldier game that I'm used to. I'm not a special operator or anything like that. But that's exactly the kind of conflict that they're facing in Ukraine right now. They're dealing with massive use of tanks, big infantry formations, and that's what I'm used to. That's what I know, and that's what I can help provide.
Yeah, and so are you actually training guys over there, or can you give us more specifics on what you do?
Yeah, initially I was with the Ukrainian Armed Forces when I first got over there in March. And after a couple of months, I moved to a training role, and that was actually a really great thing. I was able to have a lot more effects, I would say, trained up, over 600 guys who deployed to the front from a particular unit. And they did really well. They did a really great job, those guys. So.
Awesome. Now your start to your tour in Ukraine got off to a little bit of a bumpy one. Can you share with us what happened?
Yeah, so initially when I got there in late March, we were in the middle of the Battle of Kyiv. So the Ukrainians were just kind of doing everything they could to stop the Russians from taking their capital city, which is a smart play. So I was out there with some other Westerners, and we were up in Kyiv, and I got shot. So, and of course I did. This is a very, very serious war. There is a lot of lead in the air over in Ukraine.
And what were you shot? What happened? I mean, were you shot by small arms, or what type of weapon?
Yeah, this was small arms. A guy hit with a bullet. I actually got hit twice with the same bullet. That was interesting and fun. And it was really rough. I almost died when I hit when I got off the X and I hit the surgery table 2 days later. My blood pressure was 60/20. It was low the entire time. I was unconscious for days, and kind of in and out, barely in the hospital for weeks. But the Ukrainians did a really great job keeping me alive, and actually I'm completely healthy, and I'll be able to shoot, move, and communicate no problem in the future.
And how was the experience getting medical care in Kyiv? I mean, at the time the war was raging, it must have been a pretty crazy time to be in a hospital with such a serious injury.
Yeah, luckily, things at the moment I got hit, things were starting to die down in Kyiv. We were basically chasing the Russians out of the north, and so I had I had a lot of care available to me. I was able to get a lot of blood, um, and they gave me every resource they possibly could, and it was an unknown whether those resources would have been well used. I could have easily died. So they did it anyway, and they gave me the best care they could. I was in uh, I was treated by their top doctors in Kyiv. It was a great experience.
Yeah, what a start, huh? And this show is all about resilience. And I mean, here you are, recovering still from these crazy wounds and injuries, and you're getting ready to, redeploy out there. I mean, wow, talk about resilience. What is it, that makes you want to go back?
We got to win this thing. I mean, there's a lot of America. We really do care about the peace in the world. We do care. So, and I care. We've got to solve this problem. I know a lot of people, on the news are talking nuclear war, this and that. One of the ways that you can halt all the inflation, all the nuclear war problems is you went on the battlefield in Ukraine. You show Russia that they can't do this. They can't they can't do interventions in Georgia, and they can't do interventions in Syria. They certainly cannot annex a country and continue on annexing countries, which is ultimately what it seems their goal would have been had they been able to take Ukraine.
Mhm. Yeah, and are there a lot of, I mean, we read that there's a lot of foreigners like you fighting in the Ukraine. I mean, is it an overwhelming number? Do you bump into people all the time, fellow Americans? What's your sense of that?
Oh, we're all over the place. It's hard to know how many are actually there. I wouldn't put a number to it.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of Westerners over there. And Ukrainians themselves, they actually speak a lot of English. Probably 60% of the people I met in Ukraine at least understood, and a
Mhm.
lot of those people even could speak English themselves. Uh, as well as, I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. And I never felt when I dealt with the Ukrainians that I wasn't dealing with a Westerner. They think and they act like free, independent people. They're wonderful people, and so working with them is like working with any Westerner.
Right. And in terms of resilience, how do you rate the Ukrainians? I mean, how does it feel, fighting with them?
Oh my goodness. Uh, so when in only in the small moments of reflection, uh, just do they consider what they've lost? So when you're having a conversation with one, and when you have time, they might think about how sad this actually is, and express that shit to end. They want it to stop, and they're going to put in everything possible. When I got to the training academy that I was working at, they had already established, an 8-man permanent instructor team, a flaming Ferris wheel of classes, all the soldiers. I mean, every soldier. Normally in a military, you have one guy who's pretty bad, or you have a group of dudes who kind of form a clique of people who kind of suck. The Ukrainians, every single dude down to that lowest level dude, they are ready to go. They want to absorb as much information as they can. They want to learn, they want to fight, and they want to kick Russia out. They are full steam ahead. They are highly motivated.
So it's the motivation to kick Russia out that's creating this incredible resilience. I mean, they obviously, it sounds like they have that as a part of their history too, with the
Yeah, so I mean, I would say they've endured a lot. I've learned a lot about Ukraine since I've been there. The Holodomor man-made genocide in the 1930s was something that they've endured. They've endured several interventions by Russia to basically try to exterminate them,
Mhm.
and they're super resilient people. I've lived all over the country in the United States, and
Mhm.
they remind me of the American South, right?
Awesome. And what's it like training the volunteers? I mean, you've come from an army where everything's very structured. Now you're going to a country that's in the midst of a crazy, war, and there's all these people coming in from around the world. What's it like, working and training these volunteers? How do you know if they're any good or not on the battlefield and so on?
I mean, the main thing you need is the motivation, the capacity to learn. Definitely the lower level guys. I mean, they're paying attention, they're sponges, they're absorbing, and one thing that's interesting is they're developing even new Ukrainian military volunteers. They're developing new ways to engage the Russians. So we're seeing a lot of new things pop up, especially the drone use, and some electronic warfare use that's super interesting. And you got these young guys coming up with these ideas, implementing on the battlefield live, and they're working. Ukrainians are very smart. They're very creative, intelligent people.
Mhm.
Probably the worst people that you run into are the guys who have 20 years in the military or something like that. And it's like, they I don't know how many wars have been fought that the Ukrainian armed forces have fought in the last 20 years. Well, I should correct that. They fought the Donbass war. So the Donbass veterans, they were a major resource that I would lean on when I was at the training academies. So the guys who fought from 2014 till now, those guys are super experienced, and they did a great job. But as usual, you have the old guard, and you have some senior leaders who may not really get what's going on, and they may not get the urgency of learning to fight well very quickly, and that's what the Ukrainians need to be focusing on, is fighting well really quickly. They don't need to be focusing on uh, making sure we have clean boots and spot free uniforms. Not right now. Later, maybe.
Has the Ukrainian army like had to change its strategy to a more, Western strategy? Because weren't they more Russian based in terms of their training from the past? And I mean, did you guys have to kind of like re-educate them in terms of like new strategies and things on the battlefield, or were they just great as they were when you arrived?
Yeah, they had to update 100%. They had to update. They were lucky that the Russians were so terrible when they came in. I don't want to take anything away from the Ukrainians. They have quickly turned their ship around. And one of the most impressive things is the Ukrainians, their ability to absorb these Western weapon systems. So they'll have an American HIMARS one day, and they'll be getting a Dutch artillery system the next day, and then a Canadian artillery system the next day that has a certain aiming system that's different than the one that the American one has. And they put them all together very quickly, and they're actually able to have immediate effects with this weapon system. Additionally, the logistics. I mean, you have a Dutch artillery system. How do you get Dutch rounds? And they have figured all that out. I mean, there's problems. Yeah, I'm sure there's they run into speed bumps, but they iron those out very quickly. Ukrainians, they're very creative, and they think very quickly on their feet.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of MacGyvers over there fixing
A
stuff.
lot, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the Russians? What are they like? I mean, how good are they? What are their strengths and weaknesses, if any? And, do you have any stories to share around, people fighting the Russians there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, when I was in the hospital, one of my guys who was running around in Mykolaiv told me about a Russian jet that had chased them and dropped three dumb bombs on them and missed all three. And he believed it was a MiG jet. And that's a jet pilot in a military is one of the top people in any military. I mean, they're just one of the smartest, most vetted persons in the military. And this dude couldn't kill, an infantry squad running away from him on foot. That tells me a lot about the Russian military. And there's a lot of stories like this. The competency and the lack of motivation is out of control. It's hilarious, to be honest.
And why do you think that is? Why are they incompetent?
Well, it seems like a lot of the Russians on the initial push into Kyiv didn't even know that they were invading a hostile nation. They didn't even know that they were crossing the borders of Ukraine. So their commanders, they have an old Soviet command structure that basically says, "Hey, you I'm not telling you why we're doing anything. I'm not telling you what we're doing. I'm just going to tell you to do something. And so, you know, in the West, one of the things we recognize in our military is, you know, you have to be aware of those things. Even at the lowest level, soldier needs to know why they're doing something, and they just don't have that in Russia. They treat themselves very poorly. Then they don't want to inform their own guys about what they're doing.
Wow, sounds like interesting times over there. So, Jack, what about support? What can we do, civilians in other countries to support the Ukrainians in this war? What do you think the most helpful or greatest need is right now?
Yeah, there's a bunch of really good official Ukrainian government support intakes for individuals to donate to. Obviously, if you you know, if you're paying your taxes, you know, we are sending a lot of military aid over there, and that's really good stuff. Those HIMARS systems, things like that, that's really good. If you, you know, kind of on every level, if all you do is get on and just understand, learn about Ukraine, learn about Russia, and learn about the relationship between the two countries, that's really important. I mean, because what a lot of people are confused about, you know, what the Russian leadership is actually trying to accomplish, and if you really try to understand it, um, then you'll see how they could have come to the conclusion that this is what they needed to do, right? And there's a couple places you can go. I will say one of the ones to avoid would be like John Mearsheimer's, you know, like, oh, NATO pushed Russia into this. It's an interesting theory, but it doesn't pan out. Let's say if Russia thought that that's what they wanted to do, um, well, they've just failed that mission completely because now Finland and Sweden are joining NATO. So that's not really why the Russians are doing this. This is really a sort of kind of sickness of the mind over there.
Right. Now you're going back there. Do you think much about the consequences of being captured by the Russians?
I mean, I've thought about the consequences of being captured by the Iraqis. I've thought about the consequences of being captured by the Taliban. Um, and so that's always ever present. You know, and I've already gone through the exercises, and I've already gone through what that risk means, and you know, when if that time comes, and then that time comes. I mean, same with, you know, I almost died on this last one, and you know, that's the job of a soldier, is to put your life all the way on the front of the thread, uh, and risk it, so that we can have peace back home. That's the point.
Right. So who's actually, in your opinion, winning this war? And for you, what does the end of this war look like if you had to try and project forward?
Yeah, so Ukrainians are definitely winning this war. One thing that, as an American soldier, that I'm well aware of is that when it comes to winning, you have to define what those terms are. You know, in Afghanistan, we didn't lose a single tactical battle, but you know, I think you would obviously say that we strategically lost that war. Ukrainians have to define for themselves what winning means, and that's the discussion they're having. It's obvious that part of that includes retaking all their land back to the 2014 border, and they're having a discussion about Crimea. And I mean, I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm not going to give my opinion on that particular source. That's going to be a Ukrainian discussion, and it's up to them. It's their armed forces. It's their country, and if they want to go for it, you know, go for it, buddies.
Right. So still a lot to be determined in terms of the future, but you feel like they're making a lot of headway. What about the sort of nuclear threat? Does that hang over everybody's head there? Do the guys talk about it there much?
Well, well, here's the thing about the nuclear threat. I mean, you know, for my own in-country brief for my guys, you know, I would discuss that probably by May I was anticipating the massive use of um, chlorine gas and ammonia gas, and to this day that hasn't happened, and I really don't want it to happen. And it sounds like the diplomatic back channels that are preventing that from occurring are absolutely working, and we need to really continue that. Chemical weapons are horrendously bad. I mean, really, compared to attack nuke, chemical weapons are worse for a soldier on the ground.
Mhm.
So Russia uses chemical weapons like in Syria, like the, like they have like they mean nothing, right? They'll just use them. They're okay with it, and they haven't used them in Ukraine, and that says a lot about the diplomacy that's happening to prevent nuclear war. If they haven't gone to chemical, they're not going to go to straight to nuclear. That doesn't make any sense, and that's not how Russians think.
Right. So, for how important is it for America to have Ukraine win this war?
I mean, it's not just Ukraine. I will say, if it's important for America, I know some people are like, "Oh, China's watching this." It's important for China that Ukraine wins this war. Frankly, it's important that we can count on borders, that we can count on us not killing each other in mass in order to settle our goals. Under normal circumstances, we would have we'd come together, we'd have a discussion, maybe we'd have a vote or a referendum or something like that. War is like the worst form of diplomacy we can engage in. And it was largely absent. This kind of like meat grinder conventional war has largely been absent from the world for a long time, and its reappearance here in 2022 is very upsetting. It should be upsetting to everyone in the world, no matter what. I mean, frankly, it should be upsetting to Russians. Um, so that's we got to stop this thing. It's not just America. It's Ukraine is representing the entire world in showing that you cannot annex territory by use of conventional military forces.
Do you think this war has changed the outlook on war? I mean, now that are they realizing how important drones are, for example, maybe more important than tanks, versus some of the old stuff? Has it changed the narrative for the whole world in terms of the manner in which wars are going to be fought in the future?
Yeah, so it's really the drones are really interesting. I will say, I get a lot of questions and I get a lot of impressions that like, the age of the tank is over. That's not true. The tanks are they're really scary over there. The tanks and the BTRs and the BMPs and the Burnhams, they do great. They do a great job and you would rather be in one of those than just running around, with your body while artillery's falling and drones are dropping grenades on things, right? So there's still a case for. I'm not saying that those are out, but the the concept we have in the U.S. military is called asymmetric warfare, and you can still use tanks in asymmetric warfare. You just have to employ those systems in a clever way. That's what asymmetric warfare means, and I would say Ukrainians definitely think asymmetrically. So the drones are a part of that, but a lot of what the drones are used for is to kind of replace what humans were doing before. It's just the risk goes down, and it's really cool. It's really interesting as a kind of dedicated fires observer myself in the military. I'm actually a little upset that the drones are taking my job away. You know what I mean? But it's nice because 15-kilometer movements with heavy weight sucks, and yeah, it's good.
Well, Jack, yeah, it sounds like you're getting ready to go back to a pretty crazy place, and we're going to be working with our viewers to, share some more links as to how to raise, some funds for the cold weather gear that I know you're working on for the guys. It's getting really cold over there as it is here right now, and they're going to need some special gear to try and stay warm in the trenches and wherever else they are. We want to wish you all the best for the future, your safety, and, again, say, thank you to you and the other heroes like you that are out there, risking your lives for, the freedom of the people of a great country. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, thank you, Paul. It was nice to talk to you. Always.
Be safe.